Well, first Holmes was born, then he got fat, bald, and tired. What's up, Holmes?
Beware, your host, Jonathan Holmes.
I've never seen him do it as a real man. It was Sinistar. To see Conrad Zimmerman take on that character, that was better than a Mel Blanc moment. You ever see Mel Blanc, actually? They didn't see it? Did they just see that? They didn't see you either? Are they seeing me? Ah, you guys totally lost. I gained, you lost. Shawn Alexander Allen, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, not bad. Is Alexander your middle name?
Yeah, that's my middle name.
It's so regal.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
ShawnAllen.com is owned by like a country western star, so I had to distance myself far from that.
Sure, yeah, and Alexander just sounds like you're going to take over at any time, and I hope that you do. You are a guy, you are making video games as we speak. You've been working on a game for a little bit. How long have you been working on Treachery in Beatdown City for?
Been working on it since like the first platform that we're going to be launching anything on would be PlayStation Mobile. We've been working on that side since October of last year.
Wow. So a full year now.
Yeah, and we worked on kind of the prototype, and a lot of the ideas for it for kind of like thinking about how we didn't really know how we were going to release it, if it was going to be free or something, but we were working in Game Maker for a little over a year before that too. But that was in kind of like spare time, maybe an hour or two a day.
Well, you were at Rockstar before, is that right?
Yeah.
So you'd worked on it a little bit while you were at Rockstar on the side in Game Maker, and then after you left Rockstar is when you went full-time with it?
Yeah.
Ah,
yep.
Interesting. And you started at Rockstar in 2007?
2007, October 3rd. So
Whoa.
that would have been 6, yeah.
How old were you?
Was that 6 years ago? 25?
Whoa, really? You look so young. I was guessing you were like one of those Doogie Howser types we have on the show every once in a while.
I wish I was younger. I wish I was much younger.
Yeah, we all do. So you got a job at Rockstar at 25, and you worked in the industry at all before then?
I have a kind of a weird story about all that because I used to hang out at the EB Games that was on like 3rd Street and Broadway, and I hung out there when I was a kid a lot, and Rockstar was on Prince Street and Broadway, not far down, for a really long time. So when the PS2 was coming out, they put up signs. They're like, "Hey, come do focus tests," like for like Smuggler's Run or other games. So like I got to play Smuggler's Run and the PS2 before it was released. There, they gave us like pizza and like $30 for the session, so that was pretty cool.
How old were you then?
That was in 2001, so I was 20.
Wow,
2000,
awesome.
2000. Actually, it was 2000, yeah, and then they had something before GTA 3 came out where they brought us in and let us play it, and that was pretty cool. So that was like in 2001, like a few months before the game came out. They just wanted to know like our vibe on the game. So that was kind of...
Do you first get connections with Rockstar from that? Did those hold over until 2007?
It made it easier when I started there because I already knew people that were in the company, but I actually kind of got in because they were really looking for new video people, and like they didn't have an HR department at the moment. The guy had just left, and he went to like Blizzard. He's at Disney now, or yeah, he's working at Disney Interactive now. But so there was no HR guy, so the guy who was looking to hire people had to comb through the job applications himself. So there was no filter. So he saw my thing. He saw that I had just graduated with a computer art degree with a 1 minute and 43-second animated thesis. So he looked at that, saw that I had like this interest in video games, and asked me about like what type of movies I liked. I showed them my storyboarding, and then they decided to pick me up. That was cool. It took like about a month between interviewing to getting there. I stayed at EB or GameStop rather because I guess Halo 3 was coming out, so I didn't want to leave my old team because I was assistant manager, so I was pretty much like a linchpin of my team.
So it was because you wanted to play Halo 3, or because you didn't want to like desert the troops when they had to sell Halo 3?
Yeah, I didn't want to leave before a giant release.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I could, support my whole team because it was kind of like a weird transition. Like, we didn't have. I only had like I think it was actually only a 2-week time span to try to train my friend who was the supervisor underneath me to becoming an assistant manager. So, like, I didn't know I was going to get a job, so it was like, oh, I'm getting a job. I'll take a month to try to get things in order. Oh, you need me in 2 weeks? I'll try to do as best as I can.
Yeah. Huh. That's an interesting period of transition. How did it feel to go from selling video games to knowing that you were going to be some part of the industry at that point?
It was pretty, like, unreal. Like, I really didn't know what was going to happen because I'd work in a couple of offices here and there, but I'd been working in retail for 5 years at that point. So it was like that was what I knew for my job. And we were always down the street from Rockstar, so I knew more and more people who were customers. So I didn't. But when I got there, it was way different because I did my interview there, my first interview, and then my second interview was actually them offering me the job over the phone, and then my boss came down and we discussed salary in my store because no one was there. So that was cool. It was really nice, intimate. Yeah, it was a nice, intimate experience. Also, the week before I quit, actually, I didn't quit immediately. I stayed on the payroll for a while because in holiday season they need to staff up if they don't have a specific number of people, and they weren't promoting my friend to assistant manager for whatever reason. They were just holding off. So if I would have left, they would have had to grab another assistant manager from another store, which meant, the whole thing would have been thrown in flux. So I pretty much just stayed on payroll and took my remaining time. But the week before I started at Rockstar, after 5 years of working at EV and GameStop, a guy actually attacked me in the store, like over a $20 Xbox trade-in, because it looked like it was modded. And so I was like, I couldn't take it. And I was being very nice because it was my last week. I didn't care anymore. I was just like, I'm gonna be as chipper as possible. Like, I'm not gonna be here next week. And so this guy like leans back and headbutts me after he starts getting and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm not someone who's really gotten into. I don't think I've ever gotten into any real big fights. Maybe something on the playground when I was a kid, and then I'm just thinking, I'm like, is this something that's happening right now? So he tries to run out of the store, and one of my friends is standing right behind him, so he grabs him, and I'm like, yeah, and I just start pounding away on him, and a huge fight erupts in the store, and the guy runs out of the store, and his friend knocks my 50-year-old boss's glasses off, and I leap forward, grab him, and put him in a full Nelson, and hold him until the cops come. And I start laughing because I'm like, I'm not going to be here next week. Like, this is the weirdest way to end a 5-year run in retail. Like a fist fight.
Well, that is the best way to transition from normal job to job about video game where a guy just headbutts guy over nothing, and then you end up in your 50-year-old boss is involved, and it doesn't sound like it was surprising, but it sounds like you kept a level head throughout it as well and could kind of laugh.
Yeah, I started laughing. Like everybody else was so serious, and I just started laughing because I was like, if this would have been like a month ago, I would have been frustrated. I'm like, man, I got to be here next week. But
right
now, it's kind of funny to me.
Sure, because you were on your way out. A headbutt. I've never understood the logic of the headbutt. I know it's been explained probably effectively, but I've never understood how that doesn't just hurt your own head so bad.
Your head's pretty strong, so you don't really take much pain from that. You're more likely to hurt yourself punching someone, with your breaking your knuckles. But it's funny because the guy actually left his Xbox behind after all that.
The thing. Why did he run? You said he ran out after that. Was he running with money or just running in fear or?
I think he was running because he didn't. Yeah, he didn't want to. He didn't like. Well, I was told, I didn't see him leave, but I was told he left, pretty bloody. Because he ran directly into my friend, who was right behind him, who put him in a hold, and then I just wailed away. I don't know how to fight people, so I just start punching as hard as I can. and then he gets away from my friend. I fall on the floor. He starts punching me in the head, and I don't feel anything. So like I end up like he has this really long hair. So I'm like, I don't fight. So I'm like, I'm gonna grab his hair. And as soon as I did that, he just perked up and ran as fast as possible. And then his friend just like for some reason was still there, and just he got trapped though. He didn't really get beaten up because I'm like, you didn't hit me. You just knocked my boss's glasses off. But my boss was like a really good friend of mine. Like he's like the only boss I've ever had who I invited to my wedding. So like, and I was just like, I was so like, are you seriously involving him? Like he's like 30 years older than you. Like, what are you doing? So I got really offended at that. I got more offended at him than the guy who hit me.
Sure. Were you all bloody as well?
No, I was fine because he was my mouth. Because I was eating like those like mashup like Cool Ranch like hot sauce like Doritos at the time. So I was upset that like he made me like I took a bite and out of my lip because of that. But that was about it. Wasn't too bad.
Is there any chance that scene could make it into Treachery in Beatdown City? Because an autobiographical moment of headbutt with mouthful of Doritos would be amazing.
There's definitely a lot of personal like stuff that's making its way in there. It's something I think about too because I was actually really worried because I was assuming that guy lived in my neighborhood because I lived very close to that store, so I was just like, I'm probably gonna see this guy on the street one day, but I never saw him again.
Yeah, it's really awkward when you get in, and this happens on the internet a lot. I'll get in fights that feel almost as serious as that on the internet with industry guys or just strangers, and we don't really know each other. We only know each other through this, one interaction that's totally negative. Then I'll see them at an event. I'll be like, do you hate me? Should you hate me? You don't even know me. For all, we could be friends. You just maybe had a bad day and let it out on me that time with the headbutt or the internet trolling comment.
Well, it's just, that's why the internet doesn't bother me as much as it does other people, I guess. I've been threatened to be shot and stabbed, and I've actually had real physical altercations. So it's like the internet. I'm just like if you want to talk some smack to me, come find me. Like, come say it to my 6'5", 220-pound like self who goes to the gym. Like, come talk to me. I don't think you will. So I'm just like, I'm not really scared at anything anyone says on the net.
Sure. But it's also just awkward when you've had these negative interactions with people who might be people you'd like if it weren't for starting off on the wrong foot, like a headbutt or, a disrespectful comment on my Blasian Link article, that sort of thing. But I'm getting a bit digressive. What did you end up doing at Rockstar? And you were there for, you were, in my opinion, it sounds like you were there for the years when they went from like upstart, we're a company that's going to break the rules, to like kind of the prestigious, genre-breaking, kind of top shelf, top respect level company that they became over Red Dead Redemption and LA Noire and of course Grand Theft Auto 4. So what did you do for Rockstar for the years you were there?
My job was called Gameplay Capture Artist. It's kind of interesting because you read about it and it says, you've got to master these games and you've got to like try to make footage out of these games. So like everything that we ever put out was all real time like gameplay. And so it's like, if you see a guy jumping off a building with an explosion behind them, that's one or two of us doing that. Like, where it's like, you're driving hectically, you're trying to come up with scenarios. You watch a lot of movies. We watched a ton of movies. Like, I watched some movies beforehand, but I watched a lot more movies, like trying to come up with, car chase scenes and, just fight scenes and trying to figure out how to bend the game to our will to try to make like, or just, coming up with like remembering lines or just reshooting a cutscene so that there can be an interesting interaction, like the "My Name Is John Marston" trailer. Like, if you watch the actual like cutscene, it's not the same cutscene angles. It's not the same. It doesn't feel the same because of the way it's cut in a trailer. And then also, just working with editors to try to like create the motion, the mood that they want. It's like they need. I went through a long time where I wasn't respecting like the edit as much as I should, I started kind of like, because GTA 4 trailer 1 came out, and that was the one that that came out while I was still in college, and I was refreshing like a lot of other people. I'll help break the website, trying to watch that first trailer, and I was really excited. The second trailer came out in the summer, and I was like, when I was languishing, and I'm like, I need a new job. I need to get out of GameStop. And then so the third trailer, the game had just got delayed, like in September, because it was supposed to come out that October. And then I started working on GTA 4 trailer 3. So that was my first thing, and that was a 2-minute trailer. It was like one of their first 2-minute trailers ever. So it was kind of having to learn the game at like this deep level of like saying like, because if you look at that trailer, there's a lot of weird things. Like there's the shot where we would just do like a warehouse fight a lot and see like, oh, what's going on here? So there's a shot where a camera comes through some like bottles in a warehouse, and then Nico pops out of cover and shoots a shotgun, and it was all like this like my friend doing a lot of the gameplay and then me doing like a lot of the filming, and it was like a 2-man thing on that. So it was really cool.
When you say you were doing the filming, were you controlling the in-game camera somehow?
Yeah, we have a detached camera that we could use to like. It's something that a lot of any of the in-game stuff that you see, like Saints Row stuff and all these other companies that do this cinematic stuff. It's all like you have a second controller that you detach a camera with. So it's like a debug camera, and then you can fly around the world, and you can like flatten or like zoom in, or just track along with everything. So you can do a lot of real-world camera stuff. We worked really hard to try to keep getting the cameras to be better, to try to get the tools to be better. Like, they got better by Red Dead. They were a little obtuse in 4, and we still managed to do a lot of really cool stuff with it. So,
I think most people probably assume that those videos are just generated by a separate like cutscene team or something that just plans it all out, completely pre-rendered, never playable. But by the sound of it, you get to act as the characters using the controls, and also direct the camera and make it like a movie in game, like a machinima kind of. But
that's what it's going to be.
I'm sorry.
That's what it essentially is. It's like because when you see like Red versus Blue and stuff like that, you see like this kind of jerky motion that's going on about them trying to talk or whatever. And our stuff was like, no, you use the game and you try to make it so the game doesn't look jerky. You try to kind of frame the game in a way where it's like, this is the game. We want to make it look as awesome as possible. Mm-hmm. So it's like, we're in the game, we're doing awesome stuff that helps. That's like pretty much everything we can do, you can do. So that's like, everyone says like when they say, I want to see in-game footage, people, and it's like, yeah, this is all that. Like, that's why I think that's why they started putting that towards the end of it, where they're like, this game trailer was all in-game footage, and it's because it's someone playing with someone on a camera in the game, like you boot up a build like everybody else would, but just with some extra debug stuff.
Well, that's the thing I think is, and you've helped to build this about Rockstar from the sound of it. Rockstar has given the promise of you actually play the game that feels as grand and as serious and as legit as a movie, and you don't. Rockstar hasn't had to rely on just showing, not to point out, or Dead Island, which gets picked on so hard, but it's the easiest example. That trailer, great trailer. It had nothing to do with the game, and as someone who did that professionally, I can imagine how you probably took a lot of pride in your work and showing the player the actual game and being honest towards what product they'd get while still showing them some of the better sides of that product, whereas the Dead Island trailer was just, it was misleading, too nice.
It was just lying. It's like I like a bunch of us gathered around and we're like, really? Is this seriously what you're doing? And then like within a week there was interviews and the guy said, yeah, that has nothing to do with what the game is. That's just a promotional thing. And I was just like, seriously? Like no. Like I like going. I went to the Red Dead launch at midnight, like, 'cause we're all in New York, so it's a whole big deal to go see if you can actually interface with fans. And I talked to a guy who said, he's like, yeah, I heard about Red Dead, when that first old clip was shown at the PlayStation conference, and everybody forgot about it. And he's like, but then I kind of forgot about it, and I started watching all the new videos and now I'm here at midnight to buy the game. And I was like, that's cool. Like, that's like me influencing this guy to be there.
Absolutely. And in a way that the thing about it with Rockstar is I so rarely hear that people feel misled by the trailers. You know, they saw the trailers for Red Dead, then they got it, and then it made them feel the way that the trailers did.
Yeah.
Without the UI, and course, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. That's one thing I've always wondered about, and something that I always thought of was unique to Rockstar, at least from the start. The gameplay they show is real in the trailers, but they never show the user interface, or at least I don't remember that they ever have. So it kind of takes out the feeling of it being a game being played. I think that's why people maybe didn't know that you were playing it the whole time. Were you ever tempted to leave the UI in and do some like video game logic jokes in a trailer?
Well, we did. Like, I was there when we first did our first gameplay trailer, the like Red Dead 2 3-minute like narrator, where it would cut from cinematic shots to you walking around in the game, and we were really excited about that because we got to show the HUD and show that the game, that all these cinematic shots that you see are actually linked to the game that you can play.
So getting to show that it was that there wasn't any hocus pocus, that it was legit gameplay was exciting for you.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite game at Rockstar that you worked on, or worked alongside, or promoted, or however you
Red Dead.
Yeah?
Red Dead and Chinatown Wars, my two favorites.
Chinatown Wars. I didn't expect that. And sadly, a lot of people forgot Chinatown Wars existed. Tell me what you liked about working on those two.
I don't know. Red Dead was like the first complete game that I worked on. Like, it was like I came in towards the end of 4, and something had shipped for Midnight Club before that, and I got to come in and work on the first Red Dead trailer. And because of circumstances, I ended up being like I became like kind of like the guy, senior-ish guy in it. Like, I'm like who was working on it. So like my team was working with me, and I was being able to have a lot of influence with it. And I got to, I just get a certain level of excitement just came over me during that project. So I was able to, I worked on so much of it. One of my friends started working there during that time too, and I got to meet a lot of great people while working on it. So, and I went home and I 100%ed the game. That's like one of the only games that I've 100%ed like ever of anything. So it was really exciting. I got to meet some of the actors who worked on the game too. Just felt like something that felt like the thing I was like destined to be there for.
It's awesome. Jeez, if they ever do Red Dead 2 and they ask you to come back just for that, would you be tempted to sneak in there and do a little bit more work?
I'm always tempted to want to. Like, I like watching a lot of the 5 stuff come out. I was just I was like, man, these guys are still doing, it's like a lot of those guys are still my old team. So it's like, man, they're doing like a lot of great stuff. Like, I feel very proud of them.
Do you recognize any style choices that you think, oh yeah,
Absolutely.
I can see why they did that?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. It's a part of the industry that I don't think people are as aware of the importance and the artistry behind it. Did you typically have a lot of people on your teams working on these things?
No, not really. It was a small group. It was usually like 4 people. I don't know. I don't want to give exact numbers.
That's okay.
But
sure.
It wasn't a ton of people. It was like a very small, tight-knit group of people.
But it's such a huge part of the game's presentation and the way the world interprets it before they get to play it. Yeah. Or if they never play it, that'll be the only way they ever know that game. Interesting. Well, I could harp on Rockstar all day. I want to make sure we talk about all the Shawn Alexander Allen things, though. I can't just harp on one aspect of your interesting life so far. I know you're really into fighting games as well, and you showed Treachery and Beatdown City at EVO. Was that this year or last year?
Yes, it was this year.
How did that go?
It was pretty amazing, actually. Like, I'd never been to EVO before, and, I heard it was really, like, a great place to go, and, you hear a lot of things that a lot of people say, and it all, and but then there's also a lot of the weird negative stuff that comes up, and I'm fairly aware of bits of the fighting game community just because like I played my first game of Street Fighter 4 against Justin Wong in the arcade. Didn't realize that was what was going on because I might have actually gotten up and saved my dollar for another time, but I was just so excited, and then I turned and I'm like, oh, okay, now I get to lose.
Is he in New York? I didn't.
He was New York. Yeah, he was New York
gotcha.
back then.
Okay.
One of my friends, like I don't know, I know that dude Triforce, and he
sure.
He ran the whole like Empire Arcadia, and so I have friends who are competitive Smash players, like competitive Street Fighter players, and I played Street Fighter 4. I think the last time I played Street Fighter 4 before I kind of called it that I was really obsessed with it, and I said I need to stop playing this for a little bit because if I'm not going to be the best, then I don't want to be a middling player.
Mm-hmm.
And the last game of that I played against Chris G. Like, so all these guys are kind of local. You can see them, you can talk to them, you can play against them. So, and then you find out, you hear about all this negative stuff about like what's going on in the community or whatever, but then you go there and you just see how a lot of that's a small amount of people in the community.
Mm-hmm.
It's like maybe some of the most vocal people have like these negative aspects to them, but I mean, I spent a lot of time just hanging out with a lot of people who were really excited to be there, and they were really excited to try out all the indie games that were in that area, in the indie game showcase area.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I got some overtly negative stuff that was like I was explaining to a guy about how the game was turn-based with beat-em-up elements, and he was like, "Oh, so it's Street Fighter?" Or he's like, "Oh, it's Streets of Rage mixed with Final Fantasy?" I'm like, "Sort of." He's like, "Well, I wish it was just Streets of Rage." And I'm like, "Fair enough." But like a lot of people were really excited. They played it for. I had people who like would play it until they got it. Like they were just like, "Yeah, I was really excited," or until they won the fight that they were in. Seth Killian came over, like he's my friend, so he came and he tried and gave me some playtest feedback. And just being in that indie area was just really, really cool. Just getting to meet a lot of other developers that you might not have met before, or just hanging out with people. And like Daigo.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, like, because the NYU Game Center brought Daigo to come and speak at they have a tournament called Spring Fighter every year, and because they were in contact with him, Daigo came over and tried some of the games over there. So he didn't try my game because I really didn't even want to try to explain it. It's like a kind of a wordy explanation, and I was just like, okay. But he came and tried some of the, just easier to play games like Barra Ball also. So he came and played that against, the creators, and that's really cool to be around that and see, your friend, like my friend Noah and Richard, they were working on that game really hard, and it was really cool to see, a top tier fighting game guy just come and like smiling and having fun with a lot of people's games.
I'm wondering if EVO can expand to be more than just the competitive fighting or the traditional fighting games, because the culture there, from what I've been told by just about everybody who's gone, is much more inclusive and much more open-minded than you might find at other either industry events or even stuff like PAX, which can be... PAX has a very mixed thing going on right now, where a lot of people just feel nothing but positive and inclusive, and that's kind of the show they've made it into. But above that, there's a lot of stuff going on culturally that trickles down to people where it can be not so inclusive feeling, somewhat threatening feeling at times, whereas I'm yet to hear as much of that about EVO. I've never heard anything bad about EVO in all the years I've talked to people about it, so it makes me wonder... Yeah?
I was told... this lady, her name's Kate, she was at, I saw her again at PAX, but she helped Chris Hecker demo Spy Party, and she definitely felt the kind of tinge of, you're a woman, you probably don't know anything about this game, like, I want to try out against you, and she's just like, well, I'm really good at it, this is why I'm here, and I will beat you. I mean, so it's not like, the rosy, and I found this all out kind of afterwards. But I feel like a lot of that just comes from this industry in general. Like, I mean, you're pretty much told that, like, if a woman is there to present something to you, then she probably doesn't know anything about it. Like Nintendo is notorious for just hiring. They've like I visited E3 back in 2003, and they've had pretty much the same like actress school coming there, you know, of like modeling agency women just like dressed in a Nintendo polo, a black skirt, and black boots. Like that's been going on for 10 years, and it's like even if they don't have booth babes who are scantily clad, they have like women who are like I've actually talked to a lot of them because I'm like I want to be a normal person and say like, hey, like how are you doing today? Like, you know, I don't care about the video game. Like it's like let's talk for a little bit, and you know they're really excited about it, but like I don't think they're paid to be excited about the games. They're paid to just hand the, you know, GameCube controller or Wii controller or whatever over to someone. So then it kind of perpetuates the stereotype that like if there's a good-looking lady at a booth, she probably doesn't know anything about the games. So it's kind of like I feel like the industry does that. So I don't think EVO is any more at fault than most of these other events. It's just a problem in the industry in general.
So you feel as though if the industry were to not go about this practice of just hiring attractive women to talk about video games or to show off video games without necessarily talking about them, it would do something to untrain people maybe into thinking that we're in this industry where it's focused on males and trying to make males interested, which means attractive women and the eye-catching video games are kind of a surface-level thing that are meant to just engage us, and instead we're to just, I don't know, I can't even picture. There is a man at Nintendo sometimes.
They're like, usually those are usually the people that work there, though. They don't usually hire model men. They just hire like model women to pretty much man the unimportant like handing off buttons or something to people at their booth. And the fact that I've seen it like for the last few years and that I saw it 10 years ago just makes me like all those years I missed, I'm sure they were exactly the same.
Yeah, I've been to E3 I think 5 times now, and there's a few women that work at Nintendo who are really good on camera and are actually behind the scenes at the games. But the vast majority, like when they have, I think it was when they first unveiled the 3DS, they got like 20 or 30 women to just have 3DSs like changed to them. It was really it was strange that it was all women. I
think it should be. I think they should try to like. I think it'd be cooler if they reached out to their community, the people who work there, or even tried to reach out to fans and said like, hey, we want to like work with like all different types of people to try to like get this word out. Like I mean, like I have like a friend who like she was like she dealt with a lot of development stuff at Rockstar, and at PAX one year, I think the one year I went with them to help demo LA Noire, like a person walked up to her and said the whole geek gamer girl thing isn't going to work. And they say this just straight to her face, and she's like a person who owns like a ton of games, plays a ton of games, like, you know, and it's just weird how like she's like there because she wants to be a part of the promotion of this product, and just the fact that like she, I guess, wears glasses, like, you know, just means that like she's all of a sudden a phony. So it's like even people who work at companies get this exact same like feeling just because the whole industry does this. I mean, they do it for parties too. They hire women to be at these parties.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like
I can't remember. Was it I think it was a Deep Silver party or something.
Probably.
Last year, and Deep Silver has a lot of great people at it. One of their best PR people is a woman. But at the same token, there's this other side of it that I'm guessing is people who don't really understand that the games can sell themselves, and more so people who love the games are the best ones to sell them, and think, oh, just throw money at it, hire actresses, have them show up, which then makes people who love video games think they're just trying to sell me this image of a woman who likes video games, and I'm not going to believe it when any woman tells me that she likes video games now, because I think that she's just doing it to try to sell me something. What a gross cycle. I'm glad we talked about it. But
yeah, my wife gets that a lot, which is weird because she'll wear my shirts, but like it's funny because it's actually a weird proof that it all of a sudden it starts to get people outside of these industry events. It gets people very interested Like she was our, when I was at GameStop, she was our greeter for a bit, just because we needed to hire a greeter. We didn't know anybody to hire, and I was like, yeah, I'll hire my girlfriend. Like, that'll be cool. But people would like give her their number and stuff like that, like 3 feet away from me, and it's just like, because she's saying hi, here's our flyer for the day, and they think that like, oh, she's here, she's close to video games, she must be interested, she's interested in me. So it kind of proves that this like sales aspect does work a little bit, but it was just like, it's just, I think even if it's proven to work, you still have to kind of work to remove it from the cycle.
Yeah, I think that it may work in the short term, but anything in the long term, you have to wonder, what is this doing for your industry as a whole? What is it doing to keep the industry seen as kind of an illegitimate stepchild of the entertainment industry in general? And, I mean, do we want video games to be like a car show, where it's just like, this is a product you can have and girl on it, so look at it? Is that what we think video games are? Is just kind of a mechanical product to absorb and then poop out? I hope not.
It's always an interesting. It's something I've been wrestling with for a lot. You know, also working on the commodity side, and then trying to work on the more, you know, I guess also like the game I'm working on like has that, like, you know, I want it to be like really cool and retro looking, but I also want it to be higher art at the same time. And it's like, you know, people look at things and they say, oh, your game looks like it's like sellable, like that differentiates it from something that looks artsy or whatever.
Right.
And
yeah, that divide.
We even have a term called like, there's like a term that's called like art games, and I've been like wrestling with that with like, you know, film for a really long time, like thinking like they're like, oh, it's art, it's an artistic film, and I'm like, I don't know what that means in a lot of levels.
You don't know. I'm glad you don't know. But people who have followed stuff I do on Destructoid for a while know that the term art games makes me want to die and cry at the same time.
Yeah, it upsets me too.
I publicly got annoyed at my friend Jim Sterling about it because he was using the term a lot, and I told him to stop in an email, in an inter-office email in Destructoid, because he was like, hey, Thomas Was Alone is out, it's an art game, you might want to review it. And a lot of the other editors were like, I don't want to review that, I don't like art games. And I was like, it's not an art game, you son of a bitch. And got all ticked off because it carries with it a lot of terms, a lot of meaning that doesn't necessarily apply, because as a term it doesn't actually mean anything other than, I think this game is art, I guess, or the person who made it wanted to make art this time as opposed to what they normally want to make, which is like, I don't even know what that means. So I could rally and rail on that for a long time, but I won't unless you want to. It's totally up to you.
It's okay. No, I don't want to get into it. It's depressing to me. A lot of levels.
It is. I did try to come up with alternatives though. I think experimental game. Some people like game poem, for a game that wants to tell you right off the bat it's short and it's about the rhythm and the lyric of the game, and not so much about going on a grand, expansive, escapist journey. There's other terms.
Although we have, I was just saying, like we have epic poems. Like, I mean,
that's
the
true.
Odyssey is like the longest book on the planet, and it's a poem.
Yeah, that's a good point. Poem is, I only sort of even know what that means. But there could be epic game poems. Like, I would say that like Gone Home is like an epic game poem, whereas there was a little game you made in a 24-hour game jam, or global game jam. We should talk about that, too.
Okay, yeah.
It's kind of a game poem in a way, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I did 2 games that year, and those were really cool. Yeah, The Universe Within was this game that, like, I wanted to make a different game, and I knew some people that were at the jam, and I put my name up on the board, and nobody went for that idea. It was like an idea having to do with like rats upsetting your child, like, 'cause living in New York, like, you know, having a kid who like gets deathly afraid of seeing, like, you know, rats running around, so then you have to like almost run into traffic to try to avoid like a mass amount of rats, because it's just this weird thing. So nobody went for that idea. And I had a friend who I had met before, and him and his girlfriend, I think, were they were going over this idea about the powers of 10, that IBM video
Mm-hmm.
that just comes down from the universe and goes all the way down to molecular level. So they were kind of doing that, and I just kept bouncing around for a while. I eventually stopped, sat down with them, and we then kind of had to come together and say, like, hey, so how are we going to turn this into a game? They had a lot of different concepts, and we kept just throwing out a lot of ideas. So then I had, like, this, like, you know, weird idea, like, what if it was, like, you know, collision avoidance, like, you know, you're just trying to get through and all the stuff's coming at you and you're trying not to hit any of it because then that'd be interfering with the stuff and you're just trying to get to the molecular level of humanity. But it was supposed to be based on the Ouroboros theme, which is like this hell-feeding snake. So when you get to the end of one stage, it goes back to the universe level and it gets a little faster, a little more stuff is on screen. We ended up, we worked on it that weekend. We got a Best Overall award at the site that we were at, and then which like I went through all of the stages of like I was really excited to work on the game. Then I started getting very nervous when we were working on it. I was lucky to work with like a lot of great game designers that are local. Got to work with a dude who was like an amazing programmer from Google who pretty much had the game done in HTML5. Like the mechanics were all thrown in there by the morning of Saturday. And then we were just working on the art, trying to go for like a hand-drawn art achievement of like scanning all the art in, and then I started like to kind of hate the game over a while, and I was just like, I don't know if this is going to be anything anybody wants. My wife was like, should I come into the awards thing? And I was like, nah, don't bother, because we're making crap. And by the end, like people really dug it. Also, the fact that the Google programmer guy, Vikram, he's no longer there. He was able to use Chrome's web browser and a MacBook Pro because they have accelerometers in them. So he was able to let you use the laptop to use motion controls with it. So that pretty much, I think that pretty much helps, like, because, you know, you can play in a browser with left and right, but it's so much more interesting when you play it motion controlled. And so then after that, when we got like an award, and it was featured on Kotaku the next day, which pretty much like blew my mind. And then, not to call the competition, but so then we worked on it for a little bit more and released it on the App Store for free.
Awesome.
And it was,
people should go get it right now.
Yeah, the universe within.
You think you'll ever put it out in other stuff? I know Nintendo wants everything they can get right now because any good press they can get is better than the years of bad press they've been getting. That's only getting worse lately, at least on the console side of things. I'm sure they'd love it. If you want me to get you in touch with them, they'd probably eat it up. But you maybe don't want to. Yeah?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to hop into that. I mean, I talked to Dan for a bit. Talked to a bunch of Nintendo guys at IndieCade, but I'm mostly more into my own side of things right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's always red tape and other things to worry about other than the creative process, which can slow things down.
Yeah. And then I worked on another game that we called Glorious Ending Cinematic for the Molly Jam 2012.
I haven't heard about that.
It's an adventure game that it's based on trying to recreate the ending. So you see the ending first, and it's like, you know, we made like a really quick slapdash like animated thing of this guy finding a woman who's been murdered, and the cops show up and they tell him to freeze, and he like hangs himself in prison. So so then you're started off in a hallway, and it's like you're in a hallway of your high school, and the only options we give you are like love and fear, based on, you know, the whole Donnie Darko, kind of how nebulous those ideas are. Like, you don't know what love or what fear really mean in the game. Mm-hmm. And you have a health meter based on the choices that you make. You may die, and then if you fail to recreate the ending, then you get a game over and you start over. But it's kind of interesting. It's like kind of like the first option is like, you're in this hallway. It's a really nice day outside. What do you want to do? And it's like love or fear. And if you pick love, you leave the school and you fail. because that's the end of the day. Like, but if you pick fear, you're like, I fear if I don't do something here, then then everything's going to go wrong. So then you have to actively try to work to make this terrible ending come about.
Huh. Interesting. It sounds like reverse engineering some of the stuff you might have done.
It was
when
weird,
you were,
yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
was it yeah?
No, it was just like, yeah, it was a weird project that just kind of, it was another 48-hour thing, and it was also, I had to share a laptop with the programmer I was working with. The guy I'm working with, his name is Manny. He's working on Treachery and Beatdown City with me right now. But that was kind of like let's take a bit of time and see if we can get a project done in Game Maker together over the course of a weekend.
Well, it sounds fun to play. Where can I get it?
There's a link on my site. You have to like look for Molly Jam stuff on the site, and then it's on the Dropbox.
Oh, okay. I'm sure I can find it. Huh. So was that what got your feet wet for Treachery and Beatdown City? Or is it those experiences that made you want to do that full time?
I think the Universe Within, it was like a kind of a very unique thing where it was like we worked on something. I was able to, I'm not a programmer. I'm more of an artist, and I'm saying, hey, I'm a game designer. I want to design games, but that was like the first game that I was like, I had concepts that actually were able to see themselves through to the end of a game that people really liked, and I got to work on its team, and so it was like, and the fact that we, that people were just so into it, and that we had a little bit of coverage, I think it really kind of lit a fire under me that I was just like, okay, I think I can actually do this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then about a year later, last year, or was all this last year? I think all this was last year, yeah. I found out who my dad was, and that he died shortly after me being born. But he was a punk no wave musician in New York, and he was an indie musician who would go around New York playing clubs, and he even released like a record under his name. He had his own like weird record label, Vampire State Records, back in like 1978 or something, and that also helped me say like, and I knew my mom was all into like, she was trying to make it as a poet, and she's been trying to make it as a writer for pretty much my entire life. But she has clinical depression, so it's something that definitely gets in the way. But it's like, it's like kind of like this independent spirit has been in my family, and I guess it's a little bit in my DNA. So it's like, I really have to kind of go out and do that.
Huh. How's it been so far?
Hard. Very very kind of frightening. Very like, little bits and pieces here. Sony has been amazing supporting me though, like in terms of just like I was at their booth at E3, and being there was really cool, and also like I ran into some of my favorite musicians that I kind of know because they're New York based, but I ran into them last year, and I was like, oh, I want to make my own game, and then this year they were like, oh, so do you have it? And I'm like, yeah, it's up at Sony's booth, and they got to come and play it, and I took pictures with them, so that was cool. And I showed like Suda51 the game at E3, and he was totally into it. Like we're kind of friends. It's cool.
I can see that. I've met him a couple of times, and I get the feeling you two would get along.
Oh, I took him out to lunch in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, was it last year? I think it was last year that they were here for, with the Lollipop Chainsaw Media Tour was going on in New York, and so I reached out to Grasshopper on Twitter, and I said, hey, you want to have lunch? And they were like, yeah. So I took them to a deli, Katz's Deli here, and they don't have delis like that in like Japan, so they were like pretty much like floored with the food, and I was just like, yeah, let me pay for it. So we've been kind of friends ever since. It's cool. Like some of my favorite, like Killer 7's like one of my favorite games, so it's like, it was really cool to be able to then work on a creative piece and then show it to one of my favorite directors. That was really cool. But then Sony's
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sony's had events, like the party that we saw each other at during PAX, right?
Yeah,
And
I think it was. Was it E3? Did I see you there too? Or was it PAX?
I think it was PAX.
No, it's all a blur.
And yeah, but they've definitely had me at a GDC party earlier this year where I got like my first bits of press, and yeah, they've been anywhere that they've been that I was able to make it out to, they've like said like, hey, yeah, we'll show your stuff here. So it's been pretty cool.
That's awesome. I'm really glad they're making that push. I talk about it almost every episode it comes up about how hard Sony has been pushing, and some of the people I've talked to about it are a little more cynical, and sometimes even I'm cynical about it, that part of Sony, I think, is trying to latch on to something that they think will alter their image so it's more personable than the image they were building up when the PS3 first started, which was, we've got Talladega Nights, buy our thing. They didn't instill people with a lot of the fact that they love video games, but since then they've hired on a lot of people like Nick and Shane who love video games, and I'm so glad that they've done that. So like part of it is that they really have people there who love video games, and part of it is that they wanted to hire people who really love video games to make their image a little bit better. But for whatever reason they're doing it, I don't really care, because it's getting people like you at PAX and E3 and getting your games out on consoles that people playing games on. So I'm excited about it. I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, they even put me, like, I was on a panel at Indicate East and at GDC as well. That was like a PlayStation sponsored talk. That, and like I worked with Shane a little bit, and he was just like, I want to be able to help tell your story to the world, because like I guess I'm fairly different than a lot of people. I don't know many black game designers at all. I think I know all of them, all 30 of them maybe, and it's kind of a weird, rough experience being kind of this weird like unicorn of the games industry, where it's like you have all these things, and it's like you feel like you don't see much of yourself represented among like all the stories that are told. And I mean, I come from like abject poverty, like all this stuff in New York. New York's not, well known as a place where a lot of video games come out of. Even though a lot of video games do come out of here, it's just it took me a really long time to find out that like there were so many famous people who had made video games that no one knows about them. But like people who made like Sissy Fight 2000, like they're here, right? Like they're making these games that are huge at GDC, but like if you had never been to GDC or you had never met any of these people, then you wouldn't know about this like other level of stuff. So it's like it's taken me the last few years to just start to feel comfortable being totally in the industry in a lot of ways, like feeling like I belong, feeling like I can be a designer along with everybody else, and the fact that I have a lot of people, like the fact that Indicate gave me the mic to talk for about an hour about that was really cool. The fact that it really seemed to affect a lot of people and that they thought it was really cool was great. And it's something that like I've realized, it's like I grew up with a lot of people in the city, and I went to high school. I went to a tech high school, one of the best high schools in the city, and like none of them are making video games. Like they're like maybe working at finance desk jobs, or like I have a friend who has his own company, and I have a friend who's an actor who was actually on an episode of Boardwalk Empire recently.
Oh, cool.
But the video games thing has been like the hardest thing to break into for a lot of people. And a lot of people, I'm starting to come in contact with old high school friends who are like, wow, I can't believe you're doing this. Like, I wish I could do that. I'm like, you can. And they're like, I don't have time. And I'm like, yeah, but I didn't have time when I was working, crunch hours. I would come home and still come up with sprite artwork or try to design something, or take 48 hours out of my weekend when I really don't have that time and like try to sit down and say, hey, let me try to poke my nose in, let me see what's going on. But it's like, I feel like if it's somebody who, like me, who, like my mom's always told me like I can do whatever I want. Like she's never let me back down. Like she helped get me into college because like I was poor. Like I didn't, and it was probably not the best decision to go to a $16,000 to $20,000 a year school for several years. But like my first year, I was like a few $1,000s short, and they weren't helping me. And my mom came, and she was just like, my mom's just crazy entitled white lady who's just like super poor, like disabled, everything. but just like won't stop. Like she'll keep going in her life. Like she moved from North Carolina to Florida to New York in the 70s. She was a cab driver here. She was a repo person, like poet, like all this stuff. So she's like crazy, like headstrong lady. And so she just said, "You're trying to deny a poor black child the right to be in a school." And the like financial aid guy just pretty much went like, "Oh, well, there's this loan that we can find over here," and it was like literally like you just saw this guy's face change. So it's like it's kind of weird to see like when someone brings that up, that how people are so scared of getting stigmaed with that they're like, no, I'm not dealing with this. I'm going to help you out right now. So it's
yeah, it is really interesting. I've always thought it was weird that the term, because there's nerd and then there's a gentleman. I don't know his real name. I've known him for years though, but he's just like, "Hi, I'm the black nerd." I'm like, "Hello, how are you?" And then we have a conversation. But I've always wondered why he had to define himself specifically as a black nerd as opposed to, because I guess the idea of nerd, people don't think that nerds are black, so you're the exception. Just like people don't think gamers are girls, so you have the girl gamer exception to over-explain your self-appointed label in that instance. And I wonder if black nerd will go the way of girl gamer eventually, because girl gamer is very, it was kind of cute for a little while, and now people really hate that term because it carries with it so much extra stuff that they don't want thrown on them, and people have used the label to try to look cool in certain circles, which I'm still boggling in my mind. People. Or discredit, yeah, indeed. So do you feel like you're a black nerd?
No. The thing people don't seem to realize is that like Wu-Tang is nerd culture, right? They were obsessed with like kung fu, like badly dubbed movies, and they created a culture. They talked about their lives, but their lives, many of them were the nerdiest people out there. Like if you read the RZA's book Tao of Wu, I mean, he used supreme mathematics, and people didn't like the fact that he was trying to educate himself in the hood, and he used like the 5% Nation to like help him get like some sort of like consensus in life, and then use that to become a leader of people and teaching them all these different things. And like that's like an offshoot of another religion. So it's like I always call like the Puritans like the nerds of like the like religions, because they were like, they're so crazy hardcore in their belief that they're gonna leave a country to come to another country, because they're like, actually this is what was written in this book. So they come, they leave, but then you've got these guys who are rapping about like they're using terminology that's very exclusive, word is bond and stuff like that. That's all 5% Nation talk, and then but then also mixing it with talk about video games, and like Redman's got a PS2 in his apartment in Jersey, and I sold 2 copies of Madden to Method Man one day. Because a guy, this is really funny, because he came into my store on Madden launch, and some guy who was there asked him to buy him a copy. And this was like this black dude in like a button-down shirt with like nice pants on, and Method Man made fun of him for a little bit, and then he bought him a copy and gave it to him. So then I ran into him like years later at the Def Jam Rap Star concert that they had at E3. And I was like, "Do you remember that day?" He was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, now I work at Rockstar." And he was like, "Oh man, like Red Dead's got so many, it's got some bugs in it. It's got some bugs that be getting me tight, but Red Dead's the bottom line." And it's just like, and like you've got like Tony Stark, like Ghostface, like he uses comics as his out, right? Like MF Doom uses Doom like as his whole moniker. Like these guys are some of the nerdiest people out there. But they've got enough swagger, they've got enough cultural influence that people don't, for some reason, think that like nerd culture is something that can influence the world. But it's usually the extremists in something that actually like can make people say, "Oh yeah, that's actually really cool." I guess people say like, if you were born in the hood, you can't be a nerd. But I mean, some of these guys are the smartest people you'll meet. Like the RZA gets like invited to play chess with like top level people. And like, you know, he's super nerdy about chess. He reads chess books. He reads like music theory books. Like hip hop came from being like, I saw a video with Jay Smooth talking about how one of the front runners of hip hop actually couldn't be up in the industry because he left to be a Unix systems engineer. So like
Wow.
like being nerdy and like, you know, the hood is something that has existed forever. I mean, just being interested in tech and being interested in like culture around tech, and you know, like basketball, like jocks are the nerdiest people out there. Like they're into stats and numbers and, you know, comparing people against each other, and like they get really good at something. I always say like nerd is like, when you say someone's a nerd, it just means it's like a derogatory way of saying that they're really good at something that not many people like find interesting. But it's like, I mean, just because you're athletic doesn't mean, you know, that like it's that you're not like super nerdy about what you do, because like, you know, about like basketball, like Michael Jackson and Michael Jordan, he's like a nerd. Like he's a guy who like probably studies tapes and studies playing people just like a fighting game fan would. Like someone who plays against, like, you know, Justin Wong watches his tapes.
Well, I'm hoping those boundaries between, and I hope the whole definition of nerd changes, but it is really in flux right now, where you have people who are just really passionate about making video games, but they're very socially eloquent and they're athletic and they're, you know, they don't fit that stereotype of the introverted, the socially awkward. There's a lot of charming sons of bitches making video games now. I'm trying to get as many of them as I can on the show, but they might consider themselves nerds because they're just really passionate about something. But other people's definition of nerd would be someone who is so passionate about what they love that they forget that there's an outside world out there, and there a lot of people I really like Anna Anthropy, for instance. She uses the term nerd quite a bit in frustration at all the people who can't relate to what she's trying to do and want to try to block her from advancing in the industry because they have no ability for empathy. They're just caught up in what they love so much that they can't think about another human being whatsoever, which is what I have to imagine might have blocked you a little bit from maybe getting somewhere. That people might see you right off the bat and not empathize whatsoever and just assume that you know, maybe don't fit in this industry because it is such a rare thing. You are the first black male to be on the show. And it's not because I don't like black males. I love them. But there's barely anybody to invite, unfortunately.
There's a lot. That's the thing. There's so many. Like I've met so many like great people. Like part of my IndieCade talk is I tried to like give a shout out to a few people. Like I just tried to do it quickly, and I definitely forgot a lot of people. But I mean, there's like, you know, Baraball is being worked on by Noah Sasso and this guy Richard Terrell, who's a black gentleman from Texas. Very like, he writes like crazy games criticism. Also, like it's super like in depth, super hardcore. I think he'll definitely be showing up a lot more in the next year or so. I think I've had a lot of rumblings, you know, talking with people who are like, yeah, I read his blog and I think he's really interesting.
What's his name again?
Richard Terrell.
Okay.
His name is he's Kirby Kid on Twitter. He loves Kirby.
Yeah, I think I follow him.
Yeah, you might. And there's like this. There's I don't know, this guy T.J. Thomas. He made a game called Solaris recently. I just met him. He's another tall, light-skinned dude with glasses, and it's just kind of weird because he would tweet about stuff, and he's like he was living in Vegas at the time. He's now in Seattle, and I met him at IndieCade, but I was like, why are you narrating parts of my life? Like, it was really weird to see that over Twitter. You've got Super Combo Man. I mean, you might have met this guy, Justin Woodward. He's like got his company Interrobang Entertainment, and he was at Evo with his I guess development partner Evan. They've got several people on their team. It was funny because at Evo there was like, you know, at least like 5 black people who were working on games that were all showing stuff there, which is always funny because, you know, that's like the whole fighting game scene, like the weird stigma plus like positive aspect of it, that it's like so diverse, full of people. But yeah, I've got a couple of friends. That's one of the weird things about being in New York, is that New York has like 2 million black people living here, and not many of them are even active in the super indie game scene. Like they don't know. I just assume most of them don't know that it's something, or like the nerd aspect. Like music's considered cool, even though like a dude like Timbaland is kind of crazy when he makes a beat. Like I heard a story about him making a beat for Beaterator, and he did it all. If you listen to the trailer for Beaterator, he did it all vocally. Like he did it. He was like boom, 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 and then so I heard that he was just like, yeah, record this part. Now play that back to me. Now record this. Now play. And he was just like this crazy. Like he knows so much about this side of it, but people don't for some reason think of that as like, oh, that's like video games, right? Like because video games have this stigma of you're a nerd if you play video games, but you're not a nerd if you hooked up 2 tape recorders to each other to sample off of a light post, like back in the 70s. Like for some reason that wasn't like that type of tech like knowledge was like, nah, that's cool because that became hip hop, and like games aren't hip hop. They're like clown shoes in comparison. So,
yeah, I being old enough, I can remember when, and it's interesting you would bring up the fighting game scene because this relates to that. If you only had enough money to put some quarters into a machine, or if you were only willing to commit a few quarters, then you weren't necessarily a nerd. And like a lot of people in the fighting game scene haven't been stamped with that nerd label in the same way, and it hasn't taken their life down the same road, I think. Whereas if you have enough money to buy like a $500 console and then $500 games, and that's where you're putting your money, $50 games, $500 console, sitting alone in your room as opposed to going out to the arcade and socializing. There's a huge gap between fighting game fans that I've met growing up in the arcade scene than the console video game fans, who end up getting called nerd a lot more because that's where their priorities seem to be when you look on the outside. But there's really not. They're doing the same thing. It's the exact same activity, but where you do it, how much money you spend on it, will determine what class you get thrown into.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's I don't like it. I don't understand any of it. There's too much. When I was a kid, we had to write in my biology class about classification and if giving things titles and stuff was helpful and beneficial. And I used to think that was true, but as I've gotten older, I'm just like, like me, I'm just like I've gotten asked what I am, who I am, where I'm from, blah blah blah, by so many people, and I'm like, I'm just a person. Like I really like a line from a Fuji song where he says, "Before black, I'm first human," and I'm like, yeah, I'm just a person. Like I don't like to deal with race. I don't want it to be a part of my life because I think it's all kind of stupid. And I think anyone who's like trying to like put people in little corners or try to say, oh, you don't belong here because of this, but then, or isn't actively trying to just get all people to try to make games is kind of foolish. But like, it's unfortunately the fact that like I have some slight success, so I have to kind of look back on my past, look at who I am, and I'm like, oh, well, I should actually be telling other people like you can be like me, even though I don't want to like embrace like a lot of things that people want to put on me, like I don't know, in high school I scolded a friend who, because I was a Christian at the time, and I was with a few friends who were like, oh, what, you don't believe in God, blah blah, and I was like, jumping down that guy's throat, and then within the same year, like I was 14, and I just eventually was like, what? No, I don't believe in that anymore. But I don't think I'm an atheist. Like, I don't think I'm an agnostic. I don't want the title that people want to give me because it's kind of stupid. It's like, no, I have my own beliefs. I think about something else. Like, I always think like it's weird when people either want to take a title onto themselves but not actually actively support it, because then that becomes a problem, right? It's like if you're say like, oh, I'm this type of person, and it's like, well, do you do this? And it's like, no. Do you do any of the things that make up that person? It's like, no. But that's how I was raised, and it's like, yeah, but like, if your family were racists and you're not a racist, are you still a racist? Like, it's sort of weird. Like, just because you were raised a specific way or society gave you a specific term doesn't mean you have to like own it. Doesn't mean And then, but then on the other side, it's like sometimes you do have, like, I feel like I'm having to own it a little more, being a black game designer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have to own it because I know other people want to be that too, and they want to see some success. So it's like, well, okay, fine, this is me, this is who I am. I will, conform to, labeling for the sake of educating and saying, like, hey, because it was kind of like when they were like, oh, Obama's going to be the first black president, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's cool, I guess. And then they were like, oh, his mom's white, and he never met his black father, and I was like, oh, that's just like me. That's more interesting to me than him just being the first black president. I'm like, oh, he's the first, like, biracial, like, because, like, my mom's from the South, mom's from the South, his mom's from the Midwest, right? So it's like, kind of like got that whole angle, like, I felt so much more related to it. That I was like, oh, well, that's more interesting to me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I was like, so it's like kind of like people throw that label on him, and I'm like, no, he's like the first, like, mixed guy. Like, he was born out of a very specific type of, like, forbidden love, right? Like, my mom, like, gets told so much crap from her family, or she used to, because I was the bastard kid of, like, a black man. So it was like, so I didn't want to own any of that, but I find that, like, you have to. And even, like, Obama, like, is a guy who doesn't want to own that, right? Like, he says, I'm not the president of Black America, and then every comedian comes out and says, well, no, you are, you have to actually own that because you do mean something for that, and it's kind of an interesting tightrope to walk.
Absolutely. He owes it to all the people who feel like they can't necessarily make it unless somebody owns their blackness and accepts it and shows it as part of who they are. But at the same time, why would anyone want to be defined by a label like that? Why would anyone want to think to themselves, well, because I'm in this label, that means I have to think this or like this or don't like this, and reject their own unique identity in that way by lumping themselves into a group. It's I think you're doing it right, though. You're openly saying how you think about yourself and your fit in the world around you and how you're seen and how you see yourself, while still accepting the fact that, to the world, you are black. You are black to the world. But to you, you are you, which is probably better overall. I make my race a secret because it's way too fun to go to a black neighborhood and have people be like, oh, yeah, I can tell you're black. And then I go to a Middle Eastern-run gas station, and they all start speaking Iraqi to me because they think I look like I'm from Iraq. And then I'll go to a Portuguese neighborhood, and I'll get Portuguese spoken at me, or a Spanish neighborhood, and everyone will start speaking Spanish to me.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, I bet you know exactly how that is.
Well, I mean, like, my beard, like, gets me, like, approached. My beard and my light-skinned nature gets me approached by... I've gotten approached by, like, full-on, like, Islamic dudes, like, with giant beards, and Hasids at the... Like, within 20 minutes of each other, like, dudes in full suits are like, we're like, Shalom, like, do you know about the holiday this month? And I'm like, I'm not anything like what you guys think I am. Like, I don't believe in anything that you do. Just because I have a beard and just because I look vaguely Middle Eastern doesn't mean I'm, like, down with any of your crews.
But you got to learn so much about them right off the bat. Their preconception about you said so much about them that was legit.
Yeah, I had that where I was walking with a few coworkers who were, visibly more black than me, and they were not stopped or talked to at all. So I was like, well, that's also another thing that I'm like, if you're not even going to talk to my friends, like, why do I want to talk to you?
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to, like, just shut down and, like, look at other people like, oh, you're not one of us, so we're not going to talk to you, but you look like you might sort of be one of us, despite the fact you're wearing, like, nothing like what we wear, then... So yeah, it's always a weird, like, subversion.
It's a litmus test, yeah. When you are of race that is hard to pin down for people right away, you can find out exactly where they're coming from as they relate to other races, which gives you the leg up. We live in this world where people are so... It's tough. I get in this argument a lot. It's totally unrelated to video games. I'll get back to video games in a second, I promise. We only have 15 minutes left. Okay. Jesus, we're talking about this. We can talk about whatever we want. It's my show. Yeah. But anyway, we live in this world where everyone's so encouraged to not be racially insensitive in the things that they say that it's taught people whom have racist beliefs how to hide so well. And I'm often open to, like, if you want to say something racially insensitive, as long as there's nothing racist behind it, maybe you should say it and then deal with the consequences instead of being so skilled at covering up what you actually think, because that's scarier to me. People who you can't tell what they're thinking. The skilled, quiet racists, they're the most troubling.
Yeah, I've had to deal with a little bit of that.
I bet you have.
Yeah, I don't even want to get into it.
You don't have to.
Yeah,
but I would imagine that as you're moving up in the industry as well, you may end up facing more of that, because sadly the video game industry, there's a lot of wonderful people here, but there's a lot of people that have been into their world of controlling their programming, controlling their graphics, and have a very tight, narrow view because that's been attractive to them for whatever reason, for whatever problems they may have. So when you enter their world, it's been difficult for me at times. I can definitely say that, and it may have been for you too.
Yep.
Enough said.
It's another thing I laugh about all the time, or else I think I would jump out the window.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I share that with you. And I got that new Capcom. You like Capcom, right?
Yeah.
I got the Capcom
Sort of.
30th. You like classic Capcom?
I love a lot of the people that work there, but as I've met more and more people, I've learned how kind of terrible the overall company is. So that's been kind of disconcerting.
Has it been terrible for a while that you know of?
Yeah. Just kind of like, I don't know, upper management is not good, and just finding out weird things that people have done to I don't know, disassociate themselves with things, and just I've heard about way too much scandalous things that makes me have to look at the way things go a little differently. I mean, I guess that's the whole way with the industry in general, right? You say, oh, these guys are doing these really cool things, and then you find out DLC came out, another version of a game came out and they're selling it for a full price, and you're like, well, why did they do that? And it's because the company doesn't want to try to understand how to do DLC. That's kind of a weird political move, or the fact that people just throw people under the bus or fire people or not promote them, or just for a number of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I've just one little thing is I've heard they don't respect their American branch that much compared to their European branch, but that doesn't make any sense to me because America is their biggest market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they've had some of their biggest successes. It was so much of Capcom USA that got Street Fighter, got Mega Man, kind of rebuilt those brands so they were things that people actively want to be associated with the communities around them. So much of that was Seth Killian and Capcom USA in general.
Yeah, Seth was awesome, yeah. Seth is still awesome. But without him there, I feel like you see a little bit of things changing already, not necessarily in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I had a friend. I have at least one person I know got fired during that whole layoff thing.
Oh yeah.
That happened a few months ago. That wasn't actually really a big story, but it was just they did some restructuring, and I have a friend who, he probably doesn't mind as much because then you probably get some severance and get to take some time to do your own thing for a little bit. But it's just kind of weird when you try to fight for a company for a long time and then all of a sudden their thing is to say, hey, goodbye.
Yeah, absolutely, and they've done that to quite a few people. The fact that they didn't fight tooth and nail to keep Inafune in there, and then of course the whole Clover thing, and I could go on and on. I was just going to ask you what you thought of Balrog and Zangief, because I promised people on Twitter I would.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you promised one of my friends about the Zangief thing. My friend who, I had dinner with him last night, and we were, he bought me a Mecha Zangief, the little kid robot toy.
Oh, cool.
I like Zangief. I used to, I don't know, Street Fighter's been kind of weird for me. I got really super into wanting to be good at Street Fighter with 4. Mm-hmm. And 3 and Capcom vs. SNK 2 were the games that that got me back into fighting games after like a long break.
Mm-hmm.
And so Hugo was like my favorite. Hugo and Alex were my favorite guys. So then that meant, go into Street Fighter 4 and play like Abel and Zangief. And then I found that I really like Zangief. I think Balrog is a very weird character because when I was a kid, he looked a lot like me.
Mm-hmm.
And as an adult, he looks nothing like me. Like, now he's like, when they finally stopped being, like, caring about Mike Tyson suing them for, like, likeness rights, they started just making him look more and more like Mike Tyson. And they just, I don't know, it's kind of like this weird, like, lovable racist character. Because, I mean, like, and when people say, like, he's racist, a racist character, and I'm like, all he ever talks about is money. Like, and they made him so stupid. Like, and I think his stupidity is funny, but it's like comes from an ignorant place. I mean, he's just like, I got paid, and like I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, I'm glad he's not like a complete ripoff of Mike Tyson, because I think that would be like a gross misrepresentation of a guy who has been, like Mike Tyson's a guy who's been abused by just the industry that he was in from a young age. So at least they took him in a different direction. And I think he's funny, but it's kind of been a weird transition. Because, I mean, you see the old one, and I was always confused why his profile picture was super dark. And then his regular character looked like me with like a short haircut, like light-skinned. And he was voiced by the announcer back then. Remember, he was
that's
1,
right.
2,
with the punches.
Over time, he couldn't even have his own voice back then. And now he's got his own very narrow-minded view of the world, and he's also really confusing because it's like, why was he part of the Shadaloo? Like why is this ex-boxer guy who fought a dude with like brass knuckles in his boxing gloves? Like, why is he a part of this massive like government conspiracy?
Some people think that the Shadaloo is just as many stereotypes against people that because Vega is kind of effeminate and he's really into his looks, so it's kind of like, pretty boys are gross and bad and you should beat them up.
Well, he's based on a character. I mean, they're all based on like real people or anime characters. Like, you can actually, there's this site, it's like, I forgot what it's called. I think it's called fightingstreet.com, and they have a whole section of things that were like rip-offs. And so, like, Vega, like Claw guy, has like, there is a straight up character like him who has a claw, who has a snake going down his body. Like, so based in anime, there's a character that's exactly Sagat. And Sagat was in like the old game too. And Mike, it's really weird because in Street Fighter 1, there's a character named Mike.
Uh-huh.
And he's just a character. So I guess they just kept a few of them, added more, like, M. Bison, Dictator guy. He's based on like a number of characters. And if you look at a lot of anime, there's like in Ultimate Muscle, there's a character that looks just like him with like the hat and everything.
Yeah.
In World Heroes, there's a guy named Brocken he's always usually associated with some weird like German thing. Even in Bionic Commando, they have that whole like German like army type thing. So it's like, it seems like that was just a thing that was in a lot of anime, and that game's just used.
Yeah, 80s and 90s anime is such an interesting filter for how an island nation like Japan, and this is pre-internet, of course, what they got in from Western movies and comics and culture has kind of got chewed up and then fed back out to us as Contra and Metal Gear and Street Fighter and Bayou Billy. It's it's really interesting to look at it from that perspective. I hope more people do. We only have like 6 minutes left in the show. Rats. I wanted to let you know that Balrog is the only black male in the new 30th anniversary Capcom encyclopedia. It's weird. I don't know why that is. I was expecting Dudley. DJ's not in there. Dudley's not in there. Sean's not in there. Josh Stone is not in there. Good old
Dudley's
Josh.
always a weird like middle character too, because you don't really know if he was just colored dark.
I know. He's like Black Zangief, is what I first thought.
Exactly, yeah. Maybe.
Because you can choose, you can make Zangief a black guy, which I thought was
back in the day, they got rid of it in like the new HD remix. Like, you couldn't make him as dark as he was.
Mm-hmm.
He always wore like the white the white underwear.
And Black Guile had pink hair, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. I always thought that was pretty rad.
That was cool, yeah.
Guile. Yeah. I used to have hair like Guile. That was my plan, to be the Black Guile. 5 minutes left. Let's talk about your show. I mean, your game, Treachery and Beatdown City.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Like I've been talking about it for so long. It's like kind of like,
bet.
what don't people know? Well, it's episodic release right now. The first episode of which will be coming out on PlayStation Mobile. We're aiming to submit it by the end of next month. It's a side-scrolling beat 'em up / turn-based RPG elements. So it's kind of like you can walk around in real time. You can attack in real time a little bit, but then you kind of like Fallout 3, how they have that shooting mechanic where it's kind of terrible when you walk around, but then when you pause and you can line up your shots, you can do some really big damage, and it becomes very, very satisfying. So our thing is that, I don't want you to have to. I love beat 'em ups and I love fighting games, but a lot of them beat 'em ups can become too repetitive. Fighting games have too much to remember. So I want to make a game where you could just build a combo by saying, I want to do left punch into gut punch into uppercut, and then you try to do that, and there's different dice rolls for accuracy. There's buffs. There's status effects that slow down things, that lower your defense, and in between all of this is like a top-down overworld where you get to interact with some NPCs to give you tips. You get to find treasure chests in the form of dumpsters, and just you get to kind of plot your path through the city a little bit in your you're trying to help save the president Orama, to avoid
who's been kidnapped. Is that right?
Yeah, he's been kidnapped by Ninja Dragon terrorists, which is kind of making fun of the fact that ninjas used to be the pop culture icon of the world, that in the 80s where nobody knew what ninjas were, but we just put them on everything. And I feel like that's the way it is with terrorists now, that whole thing where it's if it's a white person, it's a gunman. If it's a person of color, they are a terrorist. So then it's what is actually a terrorist? We have this war on terror, but it's how do you have a war on an ideology? So I wanted to put a funny face to it where, no, they're not just ninjas, they're not just terrorists, they're ninja terrorists. And so
Ryu, it reminded me of Ryu Hayabusa in it.
But with a turban. So he's got a turban because it's supposed to be stupid. It's supposed to be that old idea of what a ninja looked like mixed with this newer idea. Because there's so many jokes about how Sikhs get picked up on as being Islamic extremists, and you're no, they don't even believe in the same thing. Just because they are and there was that whole story recently about how a Indian guy, I think, who's not religious at all, got detained and couldn't fly out because he was trying to go out during Ramadan, and he hadn't eaten that morning because he just didn't have time, and they thought he was fasting, and they thought he was going to be gonna blow up the plane, whereas all he wanted to go was visit his family, and he was hungry because he didn't have breakfast, and they were just detaining him. They had no idea who he was, and it's just it's kind of very angering. So I wanted to poke at that as much as I want to poke at the war of weird wars of gentrification and entitlement. And so a lot of the characters, the enemies in the game, have weird entitlement issues or are based on funny characters that I find living in New York.
Whoa! So there's some autobiographical stuff. There's some stuff.
There's a lot of it's super personal to me. It's super about my kind of rage against the New York, the one of the first bad guys, sort of, besides the Ninja Dragon terrorist, is the billionaire mayor of the city named Mike Moneybags, and he won't let the city's called East Fulton, so he won't let the East Fulton Police Department investigate until the federal government gives billions of dollars to the city. So it's kind of this weird, he's holding that up because he wants more money from the government so that before he lets the president be found by the cops. So it's kind of this weird priorities, I guess, of what the super rich would have.
Interesting. Did you like Earthbound at all growing up?
Yeah, I actually I have it. I have a copy of it that I've in dark times when I don't have when I look at my bank account, I think about trying to sell it.
Yeah, because Earthbound tried to. It was more distance because it was written by a guy who hadn't spent a lot of time in the United States, but it was his take on American culture in exploring a city and fighting regular people in turn-based combat.
I thought it was great.
Your game looks more like Double Dragon, though. When you see the combat, people may not know that it is turn-based. So it is very open, and like anybody can give it a shot and be able to pose without having tons of dexterity. Though there is a little bit of real-time combat, like you said.
Yeah.
Are the throws real-time? Is that right?
Throws are turn-based also. There's some strikes that are real-time, and we wanted to do that so that you could break objects to get food out of that real-time without having to expend any sort of points on that.
Sure.
So we wanted to make it fair-ish, and we're still, looking at the system and trying to figure out, where we can add stuff. I'm still going to be playtesting for it for a long time. Since we're releasing an episode, we're going to be able to, have that play tested, have people check that out, give us feedback, and for the future releases of the game, like if it goes to another platform or something, it'll definitely have feedback from it, shaping the way. I've had some good feedback from like Seth Killian, Doug Wilson of Joust, he played it and gave me some tips, so we're gonna try to work that into.
Awesome, you're in good company with those guys. They're smart.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
Yeah, we're out of time, but I didn't get to ask why you want to make video games and what you're hoping to do with them. Such a great question. I don't know. Maybe you can answer it fast, kind of?
Yeah.
Maybe?
I've been enamored with games my whole life. I never actually owned a game system when I was a kid. I read Nintendo Power. That was my game information, I would just read magazines. And I kind of just stumbled into it in the last few years of actually feeling empowered to do it. Even working at a job that made video games, I was still like, oh, I don't know. But when I saw Braid and Super Meat Boy and games like that, they really inspired me to say oh, you can do your own thing. Then I was at a party and I met I met the Skulls of the Shogun guys before it even had a name. And I met a lot of I met Nathan from Cappy and people who were really making stuff. So meeting them gave me this impetus to say oh yeah, wow, there's real people making real games. Maybe I should try. And so the last few years is the last 4 years I guess has been moving forward from just making sprite art. I've wanted to make games for a really long time though. I have a couple of concepts that I was working on when I was a teenager that just will come back eventually.
Sure. What would you say the main thing you hope your games do to the world, to people, to you, just in general?
Make them question. I don't know. Make them question a lot of things. Belief systems are super important. That's always been my life, is questioning belief systems, authority structures. Make them question genre. I guess that's what my current game is. It's beat 'em ups are kind of dumb a lot of times. Let's make them smart. Let's make them a little different way of engaging them. I really like the idea of combat in games, and it's how can we make that better? How can we give stories that make people actually make them laugh and get upset at the state of things in the world at the same time, or maybe make them look at people a different way, or look at just how everything works a little differently.
That sounds perfect, because that's what you've been doing. Sounds like you've been looking at things from a different way and laughing and being sad at the same time, which is pretty awesome. I can relate 100%. They can follow you on Twitter. You're at NU Challenger.
A new challenger.
A new challenger. Yeah,
new
challenger. Your game, Beatdown City, is that at
Beatdown_City.
That's right. Yeah, so they can keep up with you there. You have a website as well, at least a couple. Beatdown City has one. New Challenger has one. Is that right?
Yeah. Those are my sites right now.
You can find it there on the Google. Me, I'm at Tron Knots on Twitter, and the show is on iTunes. All the episodes. Jeez, I think this is 81, or it's getting up there. And also we have the reruns on YouTube. You can look up Sub Holmes there. Some of them are on the Detroit YouTube channel. Some of them are on the old Detroit TV YouTube channel. But they're all there. You just press play in the background. You do other things. Listen to people talk. It's pretty fun. I think that's it. Is there anything we missed, Sean? Anything you want to jump in with before we go?
I can't even think.
You did it. Did you have an okay time?
It was awesome. Thank you very much for having me here.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm glad we got to, meet for 10 minutes during PAX.
yeah. I was excited to have you on the show even since then. And hopefully you'll be on again someday. I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Definitely.
We'll wave bye to the people. Goodbye.
Bye.